Hello and welcome to our sessions, and today we will be talking about meditation that heals the soul, how meditation is a healing practice. What do I really mean by healing the soul, healing the self at the deepest level? I'm not talking about anything medical or psychological that is for that profession, but here we're talking about healing the self, where the self is that most subtle being, the soul. What is exactly meditation? There are many different forms of meditation, and even within the purview of meditation itself, there are many different ways to approach meditation, and it's really not anything to do with a technique, but it is deep thought, pondering, focusing, working with the mind, perception, sensitivity. It is the soul itself thinking about itself and communing with itself and communing with the higher power, the supreme being. And there is an absorption of higher energies. Meditation also involves shifting oneself from one kind of way of being conscious to a very different way of being conscious. Meditation is a journey where you're going from one state of being to another state of being that's really very different. So let us look at some of the various different aspects of meditation and how you might begin your practice of meditation, and once begun, how you will take it further and further, what is involved in that journey of inner exploration. Let us think first of all about meditation as an exercise in thinking. The foundation of this kind of meditation is clarity about the nature of consciousness. And so the first question that is asked is, who and what are you? Or you ask it to yourself, who and what am I? Well, who am I is quite subtle, so we can start with what. And meditation is based on the approach to the self, that the self is not anything physical. I, the self, am a spiritual being, a soul, a unit of consciousness. And when we use these words, the way our language works makes us think of these things as the object, but in fact, it's the subject. I am the spirit. I am a being. I am a soul. But it's not an object. In our language, we don't really have much of a way of talking about beings as if that is what people are. And so we have to bend the language to suit. But there is a shift of distinguishing between the mask, the vehicle, the instrument that I, the self, express myself through. And we usually say, this is me. And we start needing to say, this is temporarily mine. temporarily only. I am permanent, a permanent, non-physical being. I am aware. That means I, the soul, am aware. This body is not aware. But normally people don't think like that. And people think, okay, I'm a human being, which is a combination of consciousness and the body. And we think of it all as just one thing. But in meditation we divide this one thing into two things. One is a thing, one is a being. So it's really to do with working out how to think about the self as being really not the body. And whenever you use the word not, the mind doesn't really deal with negatives. If you say to somebody, do not think about a green apple, ordinarily you'll immediately get a mental picture of a green apple. And if you say, think about a green apple, the same thing will happen. This is what I mean by the mind doesn't really differentiate between positive and negative, not or it is. And in our language, we use the word not without realizing that every time you say not, you actually make it more, not less. It's a phenomenon. So knowing this, meditation means it's very important to think what is, not what is not. So I will say in meditation, I choose to consider myself to be a being of light, which is spiritual and which doesn't have any physical attribute. So that is very difficult for the consciousness to compute something that doesn't have a physical attribute, because as I said just now, if you say it doesn't have a physical attribute, immediately you start thinking of physical attributes. A point is the geometrical figure that has that speciality of having no physical characteristics. It's about the only thing we have that does that. So think about the self as a point, without dimension, without thickness, and a point of light. If I say point of light, you will think of a physical point of light. The most attractive points of light there are the stars in the sky. And we know that stars in the sky are large suns that are very far away, so they appear as points of light. But to think of the self as made of qualities like love, peace, that is having its own energy, it is self-luminous. Where does this energy come from? Nowhere. It is energy. And it is aware. Is it reasonable to call it it? Because it means an object. When we talk about ourselves as human beings, could be a man, could be a woman, he or she. Because when we say he or she, we're thinking about a living person that could be either male or female. Those are the only two possibilities. But the self, the soul, is genderless, colorless, cultureless, has no religion, language, All those are attributes of the body, and the body in and of itself has no consciousness. The body is only alive when the soul is in the body giving it life. The soul is the animating force. But it isn't that I have an animating force in me that's making me run. I am the animating force making this run. So you see, meditation is making this shift. This is the first aspect of meditation. So how does this heal, and what does it heal? I think one of the greatest obstacles that people face is what I choose to call prevailing conventional morality. And the reason I say this is because the foundation of the system of morality wherever in the world is, the basic unit is, you could be either a man or a woman. Whereas in spirituality, in meditation, I am neither a man nor a woman, and nor is anybody else. But the way people look at each other is as male or female. And then they see colour, they see race, they see religious orientation or background, and culture and class, all these things. But to see the self as a soul is to be independent of all of those. And conventional morality sees you as that and evaluates yourself beginning there. And a lot of the wounds and deep sicknesses of the spirit begin in that. You are a woman, therefore, therefore, therefore. You are a man, therefore, therefore, therefore. You are a black, therefore. You are of a different religion from me, therefore. So these identities that people project onto themselves and onto each other create the possibility of harming another person by words, by attitude, by different kinds of discrimination, and it begins before birth. You may see yourself as a soul, but maybe no one around you does. Consider a world where the people are naturally self-aware, naturally distinguishing between being and form. That would mean that the quintessential characteristics of the spirit would be the dominant energy and force. I may know these things theoretically. I am light. I am made of peace, purity, intelligence, power. I may know it theoretically, but to make it a reality in the circumstances where all the time I am reflected and have been reflected back as a body with all the different physical characteristics, means that meditation is about changing not only your perception of yourself, but it also means receiving the messages that come to you differently from how you have always received them. If you have experienced racial discrimination, you may be someone of color, a minority in a world where the dominant race is the white race, which is the case in many parts of the world. And from the beginning of your life, you have received messages that because of your skin color, so many circumstances are there. Because of your skin color, you have rights in theory, but not in practice. Because of your skin color, people look at you as subhuman. Because of your skin color, people do not respect you or consider you to be their brother or sister. Like this, it begins from a very, very young age. Any of these attributes that we use the word discrimination for can be experienced by you as something that causes harm, or something that's experienced as harmful, which you take in. There is age discrimination, gender discrimination, class discrimination. All of this means that whatever are your natural rights as a spiritual being, they're denied to you. And if you happen to be someone of the dominant race, gender, age group, class, financial remuneration group, education group, then the circumstances are stacked in your favor. You are operating on not a level playing field. You are operating with a lot of privilege, and you will be conditioned to use your privilege and power to your advantage against someone else. And then you will be taught a set of values which makes it seem as though you're not actually using your advantage and privilege to cause disadvantage to others. And it doesn't only extend to other people, it also extends to how you use the fruits of the earth and how you function in human society. And all of this creates a moral climate which says one thing and does something else. That means it creates hypocrisy, it creates double standards. And when you look at it from the angle of spirituality, where you see the unit of humanity is a genderless, classless, colorless, cultureless, religionless, ageless being of light, you see that the system of conventional morality can never apply in a world where all people are conscious of themselves in this way. So the harm and the sickness and the illness of the spirit that so many people experience arise in what I call conventional morality. And conventional morality arises from how a person observes the world and calls it objective reality, but in fact it is subjective reality. But there is a kind of tacit agreement among all those who live like this, feel like this, think like this, that this is truth. But the result has been harm. And so therefore, in meditation, you need to really look and see to what extent you have taken in ideas that have caused you to get harmed, to harm yourself, to harm others, to receive harm from people. And so meditation is all about shifting consciousness, turning it around, and then looking at the implications of the shift in consciousness. That is to say, it begins at the level of the intellect, at the level of comprehension and understanding. And so this needs time. You really do need time to think about it, to process it, to consider the implications, but it still keeps you, to a large extent, within the purview of double standards, hypocrisy, denial, and so on. So it takes you some part of the way, but it doesn't take you the whole way. So then you need to think about meditation in a further way, because to heal the soul at the deepest level, it takes time and it takes thought, and I think it does have to go in specific phases. So I'm saying that the first phase is to understand, that is to grapple with information that is the opposite, or at least does not correspond with what you have heard all your life up until this point. The next level is what really is a spirit. And how do I feel myself as a spirit, as a soul? So the soul is described as made up of purity, peace, power, love, and bliss. And there isn't anything that you know in the world that is made up of qualities. You use these words like you could have a peaceful place, you could have a loving person, you could have a strong attitude, but strength in and of itself, you never experience that. Just love, without it being attached to a person or an action or a behavior. And so meditation asks the meditator to think about what is the vibration, the feeling of love itself. And that means that you have to go deep inside to be able to even begin to feel that. So if the information says the soul is made of love, and that means I am made of love, there's a feeling, and when you experience that feeling, which is the feeling of love, you will say, yeah, that feeling is love. Like a taste, you have the taste of chocolate, or the taste of vinegar, or the taste of apricots, different tastes. So these qualities are much more subtle than that, but fragrance and taste, especially fragrance, is very subtle. You can feel the difference between peace and love. Because within you, in your mind, there is a capacity to distinguish between the vibration of peace and the vibration of love. Peace corresponds to what you are. Love also corresponds to what you are. You can perhaps think of it as similar to the color of light. when a ray of light passes through a prism, it divides into the colours of the rainbow. And light itself is just white light. And the soul itself is made of these 5 qualities. If you divide them up by sensing the feeling, the difference between the feeling of bliss, the feeling of peace, the feeling of power, the feeling of love, the feeling of purity, is very, very fine. But meditation says, think about these feelings, think about these qualities, discern them, try to catch them, because this is myself. I am light, and in me is love. So that feeling is part of me. A lot of the time, you do not feel those feelings. A lot of the time, you feel disempowered, you feel distressed, you feel lonely, different negative emotions. So one way in which you can think about yourself in terms of qualities is that the way you feel, where you experience negative emotions, is like that when the soul itself is low on energy. And when the soul itself is high on energy, then it becomes very natural, very normal to experience the self as full of peace, full of love, full of strength, full of purity. So that means meditation is essentially about drawing power into the self. And as you draw that power into yourself, it can take on the form of love or peace or purity or power or bliss, or a big spectrum of different positive experiences. And the soul, that is the self, is sometimes fully empowered and sometimes fully disempowered. And we all find ourselves in a relatively disempowered condition. That means I, the soul, am hungry. I, the soul, am running on empty. I need power. And rather like your cell phone, when it runs out of power, you start thinking about, where's my charger and where is an electric plug that I can plug into and charge. Something like that is happening in souls, all souls. So one interpretation of meditation is plug in and start charging. But it's not about that kind of electricity, it's a different kind of charge. It means you need to have contact with the Supreme Soul, the Supreme Being, the higher power. There are many different words for it. But there is an energy that is outside of this world, a source, which is our essential nourishment, and which we are looking for, which we need to connect with, which we need to start pulling energy from, because we're at such a point of depletion that it's urgent. And for many, you can think of nothing other than, how do I fill the hole in my soul? Where do I go? What do I do? Why is it so difficult? Why is it so subtle? Why can't it just be easy? In some ways, you could say, well, it is very easy, but it's very subtle. And the subtlety of it makes it frustrating and difficult. And we also understand that because of that, it requires a lot of patience. We are not very patient, I don't think. We are empty, we need to be filled. We are distressed, we need to be at peace. We are impatient, and we need to take the necessary time to acquire what we have to have. And so, in some ways, meditation is difficult because if you were full, it would be easy, but you wouldn't need to. And because of being empty, it's difficult because not only are we empty, but we're also in a more gross state of consciousness. And because of being empty, we get bored very quickly, we get frustrated very quickly, we want immediate, instant results, and there are very few people who can really sit down and repeatedly make the effort and explore the terrain to be able to get it in such a way that the power starts coming. But every little bit takes you forward, so that we need to remind ourselves of. The first thing in meditation is to turn the attention within. And normally everyone exists on the surface of their body and beyond. And if, for those who are told, oh, you're living in your head, not really living in your head, you're living in an imaginary world, a fantasy world, but maybe out of touch with your body, but it doesn't mean in touch with your soul. You'd be, in that case, away from your soul as well as your body. So some psychologists will say for their patients, first we have to get them into their body and then transcend it as the next step. So that may be the case for many. So turning within and generating the idea that I am a peaceful being of light means you have to think about it. Focus your mind on that thought. Imagine being light. Use your imagination. You have it for a reason. Imagine being subtle. Focus the attention on being loving. What does that feel like? What does that look like? What does that do to you when you tell yourself, I am loving? One thing you find when you want to do that is that you can't really hold it very long, or it slips away, because the mind is quite jumpy and goes all over the place. And for meditation, it's important to develop concentration. The energy of the self is focused on the self, as if your energy is going out but folding back on itself. You're creating a kind of loop of energy, either soul thinking about me, either soul feeling myself, going out and going in. These are different ways that you can think about it. As you get a little bit more familiar with it and a little better at it, you find your way of being connected with yourself. And when you do that, you're not all the time expending energy. And this is the beginning of how meditation heals the spirit. Because the sickness of the soul is the depletion of energy. So the first thing is to fold back upon the self. I, the self, am with me. Pull the sense of self in and understand, imagine, consider, feel the self as a being of light that uses the body. So one kind of meditation is to say, okay, let my body be, and let me just be me, pure, peaceful, loving, blissful, powerful. How long can you focus your attention on that idea? 2 seconds, 5 seconds? It's a matter of seconds. The mind will go where it's interesting. And most people's interest comes in sense perception. That means the energy of the soul is immediately externalized and dissipated. To begin with focusing within. Turn your attention within. How do I feel? How do you feel? Nothing? How do you feel? Ask this question to the self. How do I feel right now? Give yourself permission to be at ease. Consider the self as at peace. My ground of being is stillness, quiet, not doing anything in particular, just being at peace, still, silent. Then come into action through the body. So beginning step of meditation is I am at peace, still and quiet. You'll experience a lot of resistance to this. Irritation, boredom, distraction, all of this. Then you say to yourself, okay, now bring your attention back to the self, and it'll run away again. Bring your attention back to the idea of being quiet, still, light, power. When you can stay with yourself a little longer, start to build the power. Because the energy is not going out so much. You're holding it. Yes, I am in my peace. I'm stable, steady. I can hold it. And you can use words like this because the mind will follow words to a point where you can actually experience the essential meaning of the words. What do you need? What do you want? Some people, they need freedom. I want freedom. Be a soul who is free. How does that feel? Do you feel freedom? There's a difference. Freedom in the physical reality and freedom of being. Just I am a soul free to be me. When you start to do this, you experience resistance. What you're doing by meditating is getting your mind to focus somewhere and on being something that normally it's not. So the energy of the other kind of consciousness will pull at you, and you'll find there are two kinds of consciousness. One, you can call it the consciousness of being a soul, and the other, the consciousness of just being out there in the material world. You might call it material consciousness. You can figure out your own words for this. But you can definitely feel there's a difference when you're with yourself, when you're tuned with yourself, when you're in harmony with yourself, and when you're out there in your mind, out there in the world, in your mind, but out in the world, and thinking about all sorts of things, past, future, people, places, objects. The energy of your mind is rushing around, and that energy is getting expended, and this is how you get depleted. Focusing in is one thing. So your energy is not getting depleted. You have energy available for yourself, your wounded self, yourself that carries scars, yourself that gets invaded, impinged upon, projected upon, all of these things which penetrate and deplete the soul. You experience this. So one very important thing to create is a shield, so that things do not come in unless you decide they should come in. It's like a boundary where you are holding the keys and the door handle to that boundary, and you decide what comes in and what stays out. One of the things that really harms a soul is violence. And a lot of people have experienced different kinds of violence. And usually when you experience violence, it goes deep within. Even though sometimes you may resist it and put a guard against it, but yet it'll go in, because on a deep level you feel violated, you feel diminished, you feel insulted, and it bangs against all of your defenses, and it gets in there and pulls away all of your reserves of power. So creating a boundary between yourself and the external negative energies is to do with saying to yourself in a deep way that, anyway, I am indestructible. I am forever. I am pure. I am at peace. I am invisible. hold yourself to that. And all of these things that normally you would have no defense against, you see them more like multiple TV shows going on, and you decide what you want to watch, what you want to allow in, and when you want to switch channels, or you can switch off the whole TV if you want, and just be with yourself, the pure, peaceful, powerful, loving being, and then commune with the higher power, the higher being. What does it mean to commune with a higher being? This communing with a higher being, the higher power, comes once you have quietened yourself down and found a space within where you can just sit with yourself and be. Then you begin to turn your attention beyond to a higher energy, a higher presence. This is your source of strength. Let yourself go deep and quiet. Let yourself feel the corners of your being which have been wounded, depleted, damaged, starved. Allow yourself to feel those. And in the core of your being, make contact just by a thought. Make contact between a tiny point of light and the source of light, also a point. Make contact, plug in, connect, and then open up. When you open up, the energy starts flowing. You can feel it. Very subtle, but it's there. Almost like a tingling in your being where you know that the power is running in, surging in. And the most important thing is to just be connected, stay connected, open. See that light, feel that light. Who is that light? What is that light? You know. This is your source, the force, the one who knows you. Let yourself be open. Let that light reach you, hit you, charge you. Hold steady. Be in your light with that light. Feel that energy go all the way to your heart. Feel that light filling every corner of your being. So subtle, it sets up a resonance within you. At the deepest level, that resonance is shifting you, vibrating, changing your energy, changing your frequency, becoming steady, a beautiful vibration of perfect, pure energy, harmonious singing. Hold it to yourself. Resonate with it. Become one with it. Feel how it changes you. So subtle, so discreet, but yet so powerful. Then gently let yourself reconnect with your body, with the material world. Feel the presence of that energy within you. Let it sing in your being. Feel how slowly, all of the dissonance of your being is getting harmonized. That dissonance, that harshness within, this is the sickness of the soul. And the pure, beautiful feeling of this is what it is like to be is established in your being. And you feel different. You feel more whole. So take some time to explore this, think about this, experiment, practice being the soul, using the body. Detach from the body, connect with the source, feel yourself coming to resonance with that source and let yourself heal little bit by little bit. So thank you very much, and we will see each other again very soon for the next session.